Chapter 29. Patrick and Isabella. Put your backpacks into the trunk and then get into my car. Greta said. Do you want me to take your bag as well? Patrick asked as he held out his hand for the heavy bag on Greta's shoulder. Greta slid it off her shoulder and handed it to the teenager. She watched as the two students headed for her vehicle. Alex would rather have the children in a different vehicle. What Alex wants doesn't matter right now, Greta said. And we can just keep this away from him, like he kept things away from me. Timothy shared a look with Rook, another of the lichens sent to keep Greta safe while at school. They had been with Greta at the school since she had become a leader and moved on to Alexander's property. Usually she had been pretty sweet unless she was dealing with Alexander. This was the first time she had outright refused to follow them. Greta, Timothy, don't test me right now, or you'll get all my anger instead of Alex. And I really want to get mad at Alex. What did Alex do? Rook asked. He was too worried about Alexander's ability to protect himself, especially from a female human. But Alexander was Rook's leader, and Rook would do what was necessary to keep his leader safe. She asked. Oh, nothing. Alex didn't do anything. I feel like there really is something though, Timothy said. Greta looked towards the car. Patrick and Isabella slide into the back seat. Shut the door, and don't listen in on my conversation. Timothy and Rook waited for Patrick and Isabella to do as their leader had ordered. Once they were sure the children were out of earshot, they turned back to Greta. What happened at school today? School? Nothing. Why would anything had happened at school today? Why are you mad at Alex? Rook asked. Archie has been at the clan all day. Is it because you think he is ignoring you? Do you wish he had come here instead of us to bring you home? Interesting question, Greta said. I have one of my own. How long have you known I was Alex's mate? Timothy choked a bit on his own tongue, while Rook cleared his throat. Rook was the one who answered first. Alex has forbidden us from talking about it. You do realize that saying that just confirms what I ask? In not confirming it, Rook said. I also not denying it. I'm just letting you know that Alex has forbidden the clan from talking about it. You can ask him about it, as Kim not going to ask him about anything. She held out her hand. For a moment Timothy and Rook looked at the outstretched hand in mass confusion. Because Greta was Anna's mate, they would never hold her hand, and yet she seemed to be waiting for them. Timothy raised an eyebrow. What are you looking for? My keys. I'll drive you home, Rook said. Greta shook her head. I'll be driving. Give me my keys. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It doesn't matter what Alex wants, Greta interrupted. I will take my keys and drive my car, since Alexander hadn't given them any real rules about Greta, except to keep her safe at all times. Rook slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out the keys. He placed them in Greta's outstretched hand. You may drive. I will be driving alone. Greta, you can't. Alex wouldn't like this at all. Greta headed over to her car and held onto the driver's side door handle. She lowered her voice so the children in the back seat couldn't hear her. Right now, none of that matters. And, Rook, Alex is going to hate a whole lot more. I'm not staying there anymore. You can tell him that and let that soak in for a while. Rook grabbed hold of Greta's arm to stop her from opening the driver's side door. Greta, you must go back to the clan. Let go of her, Patrick ordered, sliding out of the back seat and standing defensively, knowing he needed to be ready to attack Rook if he tried to hurt Greta. Patrick, back up, Rook ordered. I'm not going to hurt your leader, but I am going to prevent her from hurting herself. Let go of her. There's two of us, and only one of you, Rook pointed out. Greta rolled her eyes and jerked her arm away from Rook. Patrick, get in the car. You know Rook isn't going to hurt me. No one on Alex's property would hurt me or you or Isabella. Now get in the car. Yes, Miss Claassen, Patrick mumbled. His eyes were solid black orbs as he threatened Rook and Timothy with a look. even though his leader had demanded him to not attack on her behalf. If either Timothy or Rook attempted to hurt Greta, Patrick could, and would, retaliate. You must go back to the clan. Greta, Rook said. Alex will not be happy if... Alex won't be happy, Greta interrupted. I don't think I care. He kept things from me. And you, she pointed at both men, are no different because you won't tell me what I want to know. We've been forbidden from talking about it. Ask Alex. He'll tell you everything, Timothy assured her. But you're going back to the clan. Now it was Timothy who did the interrupting. You know Alex will just come find you if you don't head back to the clan. And I can guarantee that he won't be happy that you left without telling him of your plans. He quickly changed his word choice because he was pretty sure Greta wouldn't be happy if he told her she should be following Alexander's orders. By Timothy, I'm just going to call Alex and tell him what you're up to. You won't make it. Greta flashed a smile, stopping Timothy in the middle of his sentence. Do what you want. I'm leaving. Without another word, she slipped into the driver's seat, started the car, shifted into drive, and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Timothy and Rook alone. Miss Classen. She managed to bury most of the anger from Alex underlined to her to focus on the students in the back seat. What is it? Isabella. Is everything okay? Why weren't Timothy and Rook happy? Nothing to worry about. Isabella. They just heard something they didn't like. Are they going to tell Alex what it is they didn't like? Patrick asked. Greta met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Patrick, you need to stop worrying about me. Alex isn't going to ever hurt me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Yes, Miss Classen. Greta noticed that a car containing Timothy and Rook was not more than a few car lengths behind her. She was surprised. She hadn't intended on keeping it a secret from them or even from Alexander. She just was going to play by Alexander's rules any longer. And, surprisingly, Zinke had encouraged her to put Alexander through the ringer. She wholeheartedly agreed to that tactic. She pulled into the expanse of manor grounds and wound her car to the outer entrance to her wing of Alexander's house. She put the car into park, but didn't cut the engine. Go inside. You two. And get started on your homework. Isabella was out of the car with her backpack and headed for the door. Patrick, on the other hand, stayed in the vehicle. Patrick. Miss Classen. I don't think Mr. Winslow is going like what you have planned. They'll be fine. Patrick. Go inside. Miss Classen. You might not be aware of mates. Greta dropped her forehead against the steering wheel. Did everyone know that she and Alexander were mates? Perhaps she should have read that book on Lycan laws a bit more clearly. She might have been able to put two and two together a lot sooner. Are you okay? I'm fine. Patrick. Greta picked up her head. I also know what I'm doing. You can head in. Achia's going to come after you. Patrick warned. Achia's not going to let you go. She raised a brow but didn't comment on Patrick's warning nor the feelings that coursed through her body. Go inside. Mr. Winslow will make sure that you are perfectly safe here while I'm gone. Patrick grabbed his backpack and then also took Greta's bag of work to correct. I'm not really concerned about Isabella or myself. You don't have to be concerned about me either. Greta added. I'm not really concerned, Mr. Winslow would never hurt you because you're his mate. But you're not a Lycan, and you don't follow orders like the rest of us have been born doing. I just don't know how Mr. Winslow will handle that. Go now. And, Patrick. Yes, Miss Classen. You'll not tell Mr. Winslow that I am aware that we are mates. Do you understand? Although Patrick thought the order was odd, he quickly agreed. His leader had asked for something and it was Patrick's job to follow that order. I won't say a word. Greta waited for Patrick to enter the house before she put her car in reverse and headed off the property. She knew Alexander would find out that she was on the property almost before she left it. Timothy and Rook would have already alerted him that she had driven herself home, something that Alexander was going to like. Not to mention that the perimeter guard would tell her that she had left the property without the children and without any guard for her safety. Greta figured that she would half an hour tops before Alexander would catch up to her. Soon if he drove at the speeds he usually did. Well, she didn't have any intention of being where he could easily catch up to her. Greta was about to give Alexander a run for his money. Chapter 30. Alexander sunglasses on. Since finding out that Greta had his property without any proper protection and without so much as a warning to him, he hadn't been able to control his like inside. His eyes had been burning a permanent black. He was going to be able to head out into the human public with his eyes reflecting his like nature. Mr. was low. Alexander didn't even bother hiding the growl that flew from his lips. He turned his back and glared at the young man standing by his office door. I don't have time for you right now. Patrick, not to mention you are no law on your leader's property. You are standing in my clan, and Greta S. not here to protect you from me. So, go back to your clan's property. Patrick shifted from foot to foot. He had grown up hearing horror stories about Alexander. More than once, his older siblings had actually threatened him with stories of Alexander coming to get him to scare him into obedience. And the stories worked. Even now, the stories continued to work. He wanted to turn around and head back to the safety of his clan, but he had to talk to Alexander about Greta. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Greta was his leader. He would do anything to keep his leader safe, Mr. Winslow. My leader isn't happy with you. Well, then the two of us have something in common. I'm not happy with her right now. Alexander grabbed the keys from his top desk drawer and headed out of his office only to be stopped by Patrick. Look, son, move out of my way. I'm going to get Greta, and your presence in my office will not stop me. I will go through you if I have to. And we both know that I won't have much trouble going through you. That would bother Miss Classen, which is the only reason I haven't pummeled you yet. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alexander ran a very agitated hand through his hair. Now move out of my way before I physically move you out of my way. I'm going to go get her. I want you to. Patrick agreed. Miss Classen is human, and any roguelike and looking to take over a clan, small though it may be, will go after her. I'm well aware of her weakness. Do you know where she is? Patrick asked. I have ways to find her. Patrick, you will stop worrying. Go do your homework. Miss Classen will expect you and Isabella to continue in a normal routine, so you intend on bringing her back here. She belongs here. Alexander said possessively. Patrick stuffed his hands in his pockets. I agree, otherwise I wouldn't be here. For the umpteenth time, Alexander ran a hand through his hair. Yeah. Why are you here? I wanted you to know who Miss Classen contacted this morning. If Alexander's eyes could have gone any blacker, they would have as more anger surged through his body. If it was either your father or Isabella's father, they will both be dead. Patrick was quick to put in to prevent his own father's death at Alexander's hands. Patrick admired his father and knew that his father was a strong leader of his own clan, and for the longest time Patrick was sure no one on earth could have taken his father down. But Patrick hadn't ever seen Alexander without Greta there to soothe his angry side. Then who? Patrick, speak. I don't have all day. Scene K. Alexander let the anger ripple down his body. He could feel the hair on the back of his neck and hands to grow. For the briefest moment he wanted to shift into his lycan form and track Scene K down to finally kill him. He should have taken the mad when he was in the Czech Republic, knowing that he couldn't leave his property as a half-human. Alexander once more waned in his anger until only his eyes showed his true lineage. You may go now. Patrick, good luck with her. Don't you think your leader will meet the luck? Patrick laughed. I've seen her with you. With my father. With the room full of leaders in Prague. She doesn't need the luck. Alexander stepped out of his office. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Escort Patrick back to his wing. You'll make sure both children get something to eat. Then you will keep them safe until I can bring their leader back. In chains if I have to. Alexander muttered under his breath as he bypassed Patrick and Ivan and headed for the garage. To say he was mad was an understatement. Greta had left him. Granted, Timothy and Rook had called him to warn him that something was up, and Alexander had figured Greta would simply attempt to ignore him or yell at him, or show her anger some other way. But whatever way she was going to show her displeasure to Alexander, he had expected her to be on his property to do it. And then she left. And worse, she had contacted Scene K. Once in his car, Alexander pulled his cell phone out and dialed Scene K's number. He hardly waited for Scene K to get one word out. Am I going to Prague? Or are you coming here? Perhaps you should call Margaret. He had already attempted that enough times that Greta had actually shut off her phone instead of just ignoring his calls. In calling you, Scene K, you would tell me what I want to know. She's my mate. And currently she's off alone with any rogue looking to have her. Fine, Scene K said with a sigh. He had grown to like Greta since she was a teenager, and he knew Alexander was joking about the danger she could have been in. Margaret called me. I'm not in Prague, and she's not going there. She is still in the States. Where is she? That I will not tell you. Scene K, I am demanding you tell me her location. I won't tell you. She has asked me not to. Scene K, she's safe. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You can't know that. She has rogues after her, and I'm not willing to leave her unprotected. She's not unprotected. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alexander was angry, and with that emotion came the heightening of all his senses. It was because of that he clearly heard the female voice on the other end of the phone. Who's on the phone? Scene K. It was Greta. Scene K. Put her on the phone now. Scene K set the phone down and turned to Greta. He was well aware that Alexander would be able to hear every word, but he was trying to prevent that. Hey, Margaret. It's Alex on the phone. He doesn't sound happy, but maybe that's the way he always sounds. Why is he calling? I think he wants to talk to you. About what? I don't know. I'll ask him, Scene K said, deciding to play along with Greta. He lifted the phone back to his ear. Greta would like to know what you want to talk to her about. Scene K, I will kill you for interfering. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Put her on. Scene K. Alexander interrupted Scene K. I'm about to give her a warning. She needs to hear my ultimatum so she can make an informed decision on whether or not she is going to listen to me. Ultimatum, Scene K repeated. Then he sighed as if he were tired of playing the go-between. 1 second. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He said, and once again set the phone down. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He wants to give you an ultimatum. Ultimatum. Perhaps H.E. is not too happy that you left him. Scene K suggested. You should probably talk to him. He'll just keep calling. And, unfortunately, I have a clan that I run, so I can't be incommunicado by shutting off my phone like you did. Greta held out her hand for the phone. She sighed, but there was a slight smile on her face. She just cowled and helped it. It was now Alexander's turn to not understand what was going on. Hello. Hello. Greta. Where are you? With Scene K. She answered. She was surprised to hear the low growl across the phone. She knew, now that she knew she was Alexander's mate, that he was going to be happy that she was with another male icon. You do realize that you're getting him mad at me, right? Scene K asked nonchalantly. Greta, tell me where you are. No, Alex, I don't think I will. I'm mad at you, mad. What did I do? I haven't even talked with you yet today. Do you kept things from me? Again Alexander growled. What things? I've been very honest with you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Then it all clicked in. So Greta finally realized what Alexander had known for a while. She knew they were mates. And yet she left him. He shook his head. Now that you're aware, Greta, then you understand that I'm not going to let you go. I'm going to come find you. You can't try. There is no try. Greta, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You're mine. Love. I want you warned. You can come back to the clan on your own or I'll come get you. I don't think I want to be with you right now. Alexander would have been hurt by Greta's words if he thought them the truth. But he knew she was as pulled to him as he was to her. She wanted to be next to him as much as he wanted her near him. Alexander sighed. He supposed that he would play Greta's game. Fine then. My dear. I'm coming to get you. Chapter 31. Alexander stepped out of moonlight into the dimly lit house. The area was spacious. Much like the outside Alexander had stolen into in the middle of the night. He knew he was pushing for a war. Doing what he was doing. But he didn't care overly much. Sinke had his mate. Alexander was going to leave her with him. Greta belonged with him. And he belonged with her. Alexander was about to lose that. And he was going to let the fact that Greta was on Sinke's clan's property in the earth stop him from claiming her as his. Normally, a Lycan leader would present himself to the perimeter guards to ask for permission from the leader to come on their property. To do otherwise could be an insult to the clan, and cause a battle between the clans. Alexander knew all this, but he didn't stop to talk to the perimeter guards. He didn't call ahead to alert Sinke that he found where Greta was hiding and that he was coming for her. He had given both Greta and Sinke the opportunity to follow his ultimatum. Greta had refused, as had Sinke, so Alexander was left to his own devices. And Alexander was not about to just let Greta leave him. Although he knew Greta wanted to be with him as much as he wanted to be with her and that very pull would bring her back to him. Alexander loved the thrill that came from going to Greta. She hadn't particularly made it easy for him either. She could have stashed herself away somewhere in the human world where there would have been very little protection, giving Alexander easy access to her. But she had instead chosen to go to Sinke's property in America. She had surrounded herself with Lycans who, if Alexander knew Sinke well enough, would be there to offer safety and protection for the female human. But none of that bothered Alexander. It had been a long time since he had been challenged at anything, and Greta was a prize worth working for. It had been a few years since he had to sneak onto another leader's property to take back what he wanted. But Alexander gladly rose to the occasion. He was wearing all black and moving without a sound. Had any human seen him, they would have classified him as a shadow and nothing more. Because he was infiltrating a human place, Alexander had to take even more precautions. He had hidden his smell to prevent others from realizing a foreign Lycan was on their land. His movements had less noise than the sound of a whisper. Alexander felt himself smile. Even in the Lycan world, he was nothing more than a shadow. Once inside the house, Alexander took a brief second or two to accustom himself to his surroundings. He was sure exactly where Greta would be staying, but he was fairly confident that she would be near the center of the house, as to put her in the safest place in the manor, figuring that Sinke, if not Greta herself, would demand that Greta be without a scent. Alexander knew that his sense of smell would not be much use to him in locating Greta but would prevent him from accidentally stumbling on one of Sinke's clan members. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alexander was sure that he would be able to take out Sinke's clan member before the man would have a chance to raise an alarm. Alexander didn't want to spill any blood, so it was best to stay out of everyone's way. Stealthily, Alexander headed up the stairs. Since he cowled induced his sense of smell, he switched his dependence upon his sense of hearing. For the past several months, he had been living in close quarters to Greta. Sometimes he was closer to her than she was even aware of. That closeness had given him an edge when it came to finding Greta. He knew how her voice sounded, even when she was whispering. He knew how she breathed when she was awake or asleep. He knew how her heart sounded, especially the way it piped whenever he would close the distance between them. Just thinking of the way Greta reacted to him had Alexander's own heart racing. He forced his body to calm down. He couldn't be alerting other lichens to him because of his racing heart. Once at the top of the stairs, Alexander paused to figure which way to go. After a few seconds, he decided to go to the right. He didn't really have a reason why, but he was hoping that Greta would be found that way. Suddenly, with his hearing heightened, Alexander caught the sound of Greta's resting heart rate. She was there, and he was not more than 50 feet from her. For the first time since he had found out that Greta had left his property, Alexander took a breath and let his body relax. He was near his mate, and, for the moment, she was safe. Alexander slowed down as he reached a corner in the hallway. He knew Greta's room was just around the corner, but he also knew that Sinke must have put a lichen on guard of Greta's room because he could smell the male scent. He felt his eyes shift into black orbs when he thought of another man so close to his own mate. Quietly, Alexander slipped around the corner. There was the other lichen. He was standing on guard in front of a door that Alexander very much wanted to get into. With footsteps as loud as a shadow, Alexander made it halfway down the hall before the lichen standing guard was aware that someone else was in the hallway. Alexander moved into action before the man could speak. He sprang the last few steps, landing his fist across the lichen's chin, knocking the man out with hardly a sound. He caught the man as he crumbled to the ground in a pool of unconsciousness. Being just as quiet as before, Alexander scooped the man up and onto, gently deposited him in the room across the hall. Alexander stopped outside Greta's door. The solid oak wood was the only thing that now separated him from her. He turned the knob and slipped inside the darkened room. Just as quietly, he shut the door behind him. It took him a second to find Greta, but his eyes soon rested on the sleeping body on the bed. He noticed immediately that she was covered with a fur blanket, a substance that could be used to block a scent from a lichen. It figures that Sinke would try everything to make sure he wouldn't be able to find Greta. But those precautions hadn't worked. Alexander moved over to the bed. He was here now with Greta, and that was all that mattered. He sat on the edge of the bed and let his hand trail along Greta's hairline. Immediately his lichen side calmed down at the touch of his mate. Je l'ai agent extraordinaire, Magdalene Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Greta's voice was thick with sleep. Hey, gorgeous. You're late. Greta said accusingly. So you were waiting for me? Alexander asked as he shucked off his shoes. Next time you should give me an invitation. What are you doing? Greta asked when she saw Alexander slip his shirt off. I'm sleeping with you, Alexander said. You have no idea the toll you put on my lichen side when you up and ran, especially with Sinke. Greta rolled over in the bed and spread her arms across the bed to take up more room. I don't know if I want you in bed with me. I'm sure Sinke has another. Alexander didn't give Greta time to finish her sentence. He simply slipped under the covers, laid on his side, and pulled Greta up against him. Stop mentioning other men while we're in bed together. Greta let out a small laugh as she snuggled against Alexander's bare chest. I mentioned Sinke before you got into bed. And speaking of Sinke, he assured me that you wouldn't be able to get to me while I was on his property. Did you kill all of Sinke's men? Now that he was holding Greta in his arms, Alexander was able to relax. I didn't kill any of Sinke's men. As for keeping us separated, no Sinke wouldn't have been able to manage that. Obviously, Greta mumbled, but she had a smile on her face. She snuggled closer to Alexander, who wrapped his arm around her waist and gratefully pulled her closer to him. Sleep now, Greta. We'll head back tomorrow. Greta yawned. Perhaps I don't want to go back with you tomorrow. I think I'm beginning to like it here. She interrupted her own sentence with a squeak as Alexander moved, so quickly that no longer was he holding her to his side, but he was now above her, pinning her to the bed. You're coming home with me, Alexander ordered. You have no choice. Because of Patrick and Isabella. No, he growled. Because we're mates. Because I belong with you, and you belong with me. I'm a human. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Greta whispered through another yawn. Mates trumped that card. Alexander whispered into her ear. He kissed her forehead and fell back onto the bed. He wrapped Greta in his arms and sighed. Mates trumped everything, my dear. But her words were stopped by another large yawn. But nothing. Alexander insisted. Now sleep. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But his order was useless. Greta was already back asleep. Alexander expected sleep to come slowly for him, but he was with his mate, and she was in his arms. All was right with the world. For the moment, Alexander slept. Chapter 32 was low. The booming voice woke up the sleeping couple, but only one of them moved into action. Instead of letting Greta out of the bed, which Alexander was sure she would do if he could move, he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulled her to his chest, and, for good measure, draped his heavy leg across hers. There's no need to move. Yeah? Alexander whispered near her ear. It's just Scene K. Get out of Margaret's bed. Was low. Scene K ordered. Yes or else, Scene K said. He crossed the floor in quick steps and stopped not far from the bed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Get out of her bed. She's my mate. And unless somehow the two of you were bound last night after you sneaked on my property, you have no right to be in her bed. Now if you don't get out of Margaret's bed, I'll kick you off my property and keep Margaret here to protect her. And next time, I'll put more men on her. And you won't get past them. Alexander knew that Scene K was protecting Greta, and, although he wasn't ever going to harm her, he knew that Scene K was in the right. Leaning over, he kissed Greta softly on the lips before untangling himself from around Greta and slipping out of the bed. He reached for his pants, pulling them on as he talked to Scene K. You would find it fatal to you or any of men if you tried to keep me from Greta. Greta rolled over to the other side of the bed and exited there. She snatched a look over at Alexander. She was slightly disappointed when he put his shirt on, thus covering his perfectly sculpted chest. Scene K scolded when he caught the skip in her heart. Greta shrugged a shoulder as she grabbed the plush, grey robe from the chair. She slipped her arms into the material and wrapped the belt around her waist. Well, why you to talk? I'm going to go down and get some breakfast. Stay here. Greta, Alexander ordered as he sat on the bed to tie his shoes. Why? Because I said so. Alexander was looking at his feet and therefore didn't exactly see what Greta had done. But he figured when the pillow hit him in the back of the head that Greta didn't care much for his choice of words. Greta stumped across the room. She stopped just in front of Scene K. This is your fault. You said he wouldn't be able to get to me. You're either one who accepted him into your bed last night. Scene K pointed out. Winslow might have been able to sneak around my men without making a noise, but I can guarantee you that my men would have heard you had you screamed. She blushed clear to her roots. She opened her mouth and then closed it, and then opened it and then closed it. She managed to find some words to say. This is still your fault. I was sleeping when he showed up, and I can't be held responsible for what I do when I'm sleeping. I hardly knew he was there. Alexander scoffed. My dear, we are mates. You were very much aware. His words were cut off when Greta turned her perfect teacher stare at him, having been a leader for several centuries. Enthusiasm, of the most terrifying lichens to have existed. Alexander was not used to anyone turning a disapproving look at him. Greta's face was as red as an apple, but she managed to keep Alexander quiet with her look, which she had to be grateful for. Alexander cowled and hid the smile from his face. It was true that he hadn't often been scolded. His father had been the last person to scold him, and he had taken that scolding to heart and learned from it. But Alexander found that his reaction to this scolding was much different than that one. He liked it when Greta took control. He liked it when she got all flustered that she seemed to forget what was going on around her. He couldn't help but let out a small sigh. He loved his mate. "Why are you smiling?" Greta asked. "I'm mad at you. I left your land. You, as a leader, should have stayed there. You're a leader as well," Alexander pointed out. "You left your clan alone." She gave a little scoff. "Left them alone. I wouldn't do that. You're my protector. As such, you are to protect what is mine. Patrick and Isabella are safe under your protection, or at least they would be, if you had stayed there. My men won't let any harm come to your clansmen," Alexander assured her. "As for being your protector, but more importantly as your mate, that is why I'm here. You didn't tell me. Tell you. I've been telling you that I'm your protector since the moment I met you." "No," Greta said with a wave of her hand to dismiss everything he was saying. "You didn't tell me that I was your mate." He shrugged a shoulder as he got to his feet. "You didn't ask," he said simply. "Ask him a human. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "We don't have mates. We have the one, which in most cases doesn't last, and we move on to the 2 and the 3. But we don't have this unreasonable pull that you knew I couldn't understand." Alexander moved closer to Greta. He noticed, immediately, that for every step he took towards her, she took 2 steps back. He stopped moving and cocked his head to the side. "I gave you a book on Lycan law. There is an entire chapter dedicated to mates. Surely, as a teacher, you didn't just skip over that chapter." She had skipped over that chapter. In fact, there were a few chapters she only skimmed through or skipped entirely. "I read what I thought I needed to know to take care of Patrick and Isabella to the best of my ability, since I was only going to be their leader for a few months. I figured I wouldn't have to worry about the 2 of them finding their mates. And even, stop moving closer to me," interrupting her own words and moving another 2 steps back. This time, Alexander shook his head. "You're my mate. I want to be next to you. Stop moving away from me." Greta didn't listen, and that simple action didn't surprise any of the people in the room. Zinke knew her far too long to think she would listen to any order she didn't want to. And Alexander had been dealing with her for the past 4 months and knew just how stubborn she could be. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She had denied the mate bound since she had met Alexander. That was no small feat, because Alexander had insisted that he would wait for Greta to figure it out before acting on the pull. Alexander growled low in his throat when Greta took another step away from him. "Stop moving. You can't make me," Greta said, taking another small step away from him. He raised an eyebrow. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "My dear, I could make you, but it isn't necessary. I don't need to stop you because the wall behind you will. You'll be trapped, and the only way out will be through me." "Zinke," Greta complained loudly, glancing over at the other man and in the room. Alexander now let out a louder growl. He glared at Zinke, who hadn't even moved to help Greta. "You will stay out of this. Zinke, she is my mate." Greta shook her head. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "That can't be. I'm a human. You're a Lycan. I think perhaps you just think I'm your mate because of the situation we are in. Perhaps it's just a reverse form of hero worship." It took Alexander a rather long time to process Greta's words that she got to finish her entire theory of their connection before he was able to respond to her. What are you saying? I explained this last night." "Greta," mate strumped being human. Greta's crunched her eyebrows up as she tried to recall the night before. She couldn't exactly remember what she said to Alexander. She only remembered the complete calm and safety he felt in his arms that she slept through the entire night. Alexander, you're not going to argue with me about this? Alexander interrupted. You are my mate, human or not. Greta turned to Sinke. Sinke. For the first time, Alexander didn't mind that someone was questioning his word. It was slightly irritating, but he knew Greta needed to have confirmation from a source other than him. Alexander yelled on the Alexander faced Sinke, who had stayed on the other side of the room. Sinke shrugged a shoulder. It's not common. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. For lichens to have human mates. But, he quickly added before Greta was able to break down at the idea that she would have to let Alexander go to another woman. It's not unheard of. But in the lichen world we don't pick our mates. Human or not, you can be Alex's mate. And if I don't want to. Now Alexander pushed himself off the wall and lost all form of complacency. He swirled to face Greta. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No, Greta forced her gaze to stay on Sinke. What if I don't want to be his mate? Chapter 33. Sinke moved quickly, putting himself between Alexander and Greta. He kept a hand on Alexander's to prevent him from moving over to Greta. He studied the woman who, if the truth were told, didn't look happy with her suggestion. He should have stayed in the Czech Republic and let his second protect Greta. Life certainly would have been easier for him. Sinke? Greta asked when the man had taken an awfully long time to think. Sinke sighed again. It doesn't really matter if you want to be his mate or not. You are his mate. You will always be his mate, and he will always be yours. However, that doesn't mean you can't choose not to be with him. You can tell Alex that you don't want to bind with him, and he will let you leave. As soon as his words were out, Sinke was not surprised to hear both Alexander's and Greta's heart start to race. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sinke had just told her mates that they could forever be separated. Greta pulled on the sleeve of her shirt, bringing it over her fingers so she could fiddle with a small, loosened string, so then he would find another mate. No, both Alexander and Sinke said at the same time. Sinke pushed Alexander back against the wall and glared at him, telling him, silently, to let him do the talking. With Alexander taken care of, Sinke turned back to Greta, who looked sick at the idea of Alexander finding another mate. No, Margaret. Alex won't find another mate. We lichens get one. That's it. If you don't want him, you can choose to leave him, but it won't give him another opportunity to find someone else. What about another lichen? What is it with your fascination on lycanthropy? Sinke asked. Because he deserves someone else. Greta whispered as she fell back against the wall to support herself as waves of regret filled her body. He deserves unlike him. Alexander took a step forward only to find Sinke's hand on his chest once again. He glared at the man. I've let you stop me enough for today. If you continue with your hand on me, you will soon find it disconnected from your wrist. You will not stop me from being next to Greta. Having heard a rumor of Alexander doing that very same thing to a lichen who had dared attack someone he loved, Sinke knew Alexander was just making a threat. He moved his hand and stepped aside to let Alexander go to Greta. Now that he was unimpeded, Alexander crossed the room and pulled Greta into a hug. Again, he felt his inside relaxing. He took in a deep breath and just let his senses pull Greta into him. Finally, once he felt ready enough, he took a step back and slowly lifted Greta's chin until he could see her eyes. Why do you think I would want anyone else but you? Because you're ear lichen. And I'm not. Greta whispered, her eyes pooled with tears. I'm not really understanding. Greta, have I, or any of my clan members, ever given you a reason to think that you were anyway worthless? Greta placed a shaking hand on Alexander's cheek. You're ear lichen, he growled low. Say something else. We have both known, for a long time, That I was a lichen. What is wrong with that? I would never hurt you. Surely you're not afraid of me. She actually managed to smile. You don't scare me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You never really have. I'm well aware of that. And he was. Greta was the only person who had never done what he had asked. And he could be quite frightening at times. What I'm not aware of is why it matters that I am a lichen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Greta moved closer to Alexander until she was resting her head on his shoulder, and his hands were wrapped around her. I'm going to die, she whispered. For a moment, Alexander was so shocked he did nothing. Suddenly, he took several steps back and scanned Greta's entire body. He heightened all his senses to hear what was going on inside her body. What happened? Are you sick? Did you get hurt? Despite the fact that she was quite miserable at the moment, Greta found that she was smiling. I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me. You said you would die. No, I said I was going to die. Greta clarified. From what? Well, I hope old age. Alexander let a small smile come to his lips. He moved back up to Greta and pulled her into a hard hug. Don't scare me like that. My dear, I'm not trying to scare you. Greta mumbled into Alexander's chest. I'm just letting you know that you are a lichen and I'm a human. You live forever. I'm going to die before you. We don't live forever, Alexander pointed out. Well, you live longer than humans. Wouldn't you? Don't you? Wouldn't you want to be with someone who lives as long as you? No, love. I want to be with you. Alexander wound his hand up and down Greta's spine. He loved holding her in his hands, and he noticed that he didn't get to do it nearly as often as he wanted to. I may only get 60, 70, possibly 80 years with you, but I wouldn't change that for 500 years with anyone else. I want you. I need you. He lifted up her chin. I love you. He finished before leaning down and kissing Greta lightly on the lips. Once he was done with the kiss, he rested his forehead on Greta's forehead. I think this is where you tell me that you love me. I do love you, Greta whispered, noticing for the first time that Simke had still remained in the room, although she really wanted to show Alexander exactly how much she loved him. She certainly wasn't going to complete any of her thoughts while there was a third party in the room. Alexander, noticing the pink blush that covered Greta's cheeks, dropped the subject for the moment. That hardly appeases me, Greta, but for the current moment, I will let that be enough. Tired of being the third wheel. Simke cleared his throat. You two may be mates, but, Margaret, until you ask Alexander for his name, you two will not be staying in a room together. Netska, ask for his name. Greta interrupted. What do you mean? Simke turned to look at Alexander. I thought you gave her a book on lichen law. Well, I did, Alexander said. Apparently. However, she skipped the parts on mates. Not that I can figure out why you're either one complaining about. I'm the one that has to wait for her to say the words to me. What are the words? Greta asked. Perhaps I can say them now and we can bind right now. As much as I'm sure that appeals to Alex, Simke said. It can't happen like that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I mean to say it shouldn't happen like that. The finding and joining of mates is an occasion that should be celebrated by the clans. Wazlo's clan is going to want to be present for the binding of their leader to his mate Y. Greta asked, not really a fan of waiting for what she wanted. Alexander wrapped his arm around Greta's waist as he pulled her closer to him. Simke is right. My dear, as much as that pains me to say that. You see, in the Middle Ages, humans started to attack our kind. Major bounties were put on our females' heads. So many of our kind were killed. The few females that survived were hidden away by their clans. Mates have been hard to find. Either they have been killed or they have been hidden away. This makes the finding of any mate something to be celebrated by the entire clan. I don't want to take that celebration away from my clan. I suppose I can wait until we get back, Greta said. But I don't want to wait as long as Ivan and Cease. Alexander held out a chair at the dining room table for Greta. Once she was seated, he pushed her chair in slightly. Leaning down, he kissed her lightly on the cheek. My darling, there is no way I would let you last as long as Cease has. And there is no way it'd last as long as Ivan with you so close to me. He brought her hand up to his lips and gently ran his tongue along her knuckles. So I guess I'm glad you can't be away from me any more than I can be away from you. I love you. Greta noticed that nearly the entire room was focused on her and Alexander. She dropped her head to prevent her weird face from being on show. Are you going to get me something to eat? Alexander threw back his head and laughed. He turned to Simke. I profess my undying love for her. And she tells me that she's hungry. Well, I am, Greta defended. I only had lunch yesterday, and then I had to leave to come here, so I didn't eat much. Alexander tucked a stray strand of Greta's hair behind her ear. I'll bring you some food. Then we'll head back to my clan, and we'll plan on the bonding ceremony for Saturday. This Saturday. If that works for you. Alexander quickly added, my clan will be there. Your clan will be there. My clan? Greta asked with a laugh. You mean Patrick and Isabella? They are your clan. Trust me, they will be as happy as my clan is that you have found your mate. Greta turned to Simke. What about you? Me? I would like you to come. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You were the first like a kid ever met. You've been a part of my life since I was a teenager, and helped me often when my parents weren't around. I would like you to be there. When Simke didn't respond fast enough, she turned to Alexander. Can Simke come? Normally, Alexander wouldn't allow another leader onto his property, nor would he want someone whom Greta seemed overly attached to. But he knew Greta had a strong attachment and had a past with Simke. She had no parents or close family, and Simke was the closest that came to someone of her own side to bring. He wouldn't begrudge her that. Of course Simke will come. Giving the order to Simke as he said the words to Greta. Won't you, Simke? Simke nodded his head. I wouldn't miss it for the world. They'll be there Friday night. And Saturday, it'll be the one who stands on your side. Greta, they'll supply your dress and cloak. Like Aunt Tradition, darling, Alexander added. We'll discuss more about it on our way back to the clan. And once there, perhaps I should learn the proper words to say to get you to agree to bind with me. Greta teased. Yes, you will. Alexander agreed. Once more he kissed the top of Greta's head. He went to get her breakfast. They would eat. Then they would leave. And Alexander would make sure to get Greta safely on his property. Once she was there, they would only have to wait until Saturday before he would be hers forever and she would be his. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What could go wrong? Chapter 30 for Greta returned back to school on Thursday, since she had already planned on running from Alexander before she actually took off. She had gotten a replacement for her class for Tuesday and Wednesday. Granted, she had thought that Alexander would have found her sooner, and she wouldn't have had to use the replacement for Wednesday, but it had taken Alexander a day to find her. And, despite getting back to Alexander's manor early Wednesday morning, he had convinced her not to head back to school for the afternoon. So now it was Thursday. Greta walked into the school building with her guard not far behind her. She had expected the day to be like any other day, but she was about to find out just how lacking the shortage of mates were in the Lycan world. Not being a Lycan herself, Greta was really aware which students were or were not Lycans, but she was soon able to use process of elimination to deduce which students were Lycans based on the fact that they came up to congratulate her on her soon-to-be mating process. After the third student had come up to her, Greta turned and looked over her shoulder at Rook, who was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest. How do they know? Know what? he asked, slightly confused. You mean? How do they know that you and Alex are mates? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rook smiled a bit. Well, if you weren't aware, my leader has a bit of a reputation in our world that lets others know that he isn't someone to be trifled with. He was purposely being vague with his word choices so any none, Lycan's going to the school didn't overhear his word. Many of us thought he would never find his mate, so the idea that is you, and you are what you are, is a pretty big shock to our world. Greta shook her head because she couldn't handle the nonsense she felt that was coming with the fact that she was Alexander's mate. And she had not only asked for his name, but they were planning on having the mate-binding ceremony in just a few days. She headed for her classroom, stopping just outside her door. It was open already, a sign that the teacher she had filled in for her the past 2 days didn't take the time to lock it up the evening before. It was that she was worried about anything of value in her classroom, but she did like being in her classroom before it was overrun with the students for the day. She could hear the students in the classroom. Of the voices, she immediately recognized Patrick's voice. It's on Saturday, Patrick said. The voice was very low, as if to keep the words from going any further than the door. She's a human, he finally finished. Greta looked startled. She looked up at Rook, who was near her side. Gordon is a Lycan. Rook nodded his head. When Alexander had put his men on guard duty for Greta, he had ordered his men to keep all identities of Lycans a secret from her. Though that order had been removed once she had asked for his name. Soon she would be as much in the Lycan world as if she were a Lycan herself. I know she is a human, Patrick said. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She's my leader. Greta noticed that he said those words with a bit of pride attached to them. Yeah, but she's planning on binding with Alexander was low. Alexander was low. He's said to have wiped out an entire town of humans because they took peaches off the trees that grew on the border of his land. Surely he won't plan on keeping her alive. Greta grabbed Rook's arm before he could go into the classroom and teach Gordon a lesson on how to talk about his leader. She shook her head at him, ordering without words to stay where he was. Miss Claassen is my leader. Gordon, Patrick growled. I wouldn't let any harm come to her, even if I had to go through Alex to keep her safe. But H.E.S. Alexander was low. Martin put in, and his clan is almost as bad as he is. They kill everyone who walks on their property. Even Lycan leaders can't go on that clan's property because they won't ever leave. People disappear around his area and are never heard from again. Papa says it's dangerous for you and Isabella to be there. Greta was listening to the conversation the boys were having in her classroom, but she was watching Rook. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She saw the smile on his face turn to a frown and then watched as a flash of black colored his eyes. She smiled at him and shook her head again. I think that last part is more because of me than you or Alex. Even still, Rook said, I don't think Alex would like those boys to say what they are. Well, Alex isn't here to oppose to anything. I can do it for him, but you won't. Greta patted him on the arm. Now I'm going to go teach, so you can go lurk in a darkened corner somewhere. I don't lurk, Rook countered. Greta broke into a laugh. She could hear the 3 boys in her classroom start to move as they heard their teacher come into the classroom. She might have heard what they had been talking about, but she was going to call them out on it. She would let them think their conversation had remained a secret. Good morning. Good morning, Miss Claassen, they replied in unison. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Greta said, I'm pretty sure this isn't your first class of the day. The bell is about to ring. You should get back to Mr. F.L. Entry's classroom. With a quick nod of his head, Martin left the room just as the first bell rang. Chaos ensued in the hallways and the classrooms until the second bell 4 minutes later. By that bell, All the desks in Greta's classroom were full, and all the students were quiet. As she looked from her desk, it was difficult for Greta to notice which students were lichens and which weren't. The ones with the look of complete disbelief on their faces and the glances over at Patrick and Isabella were a pretty big clue they knew about a binding ceremony with Alexander. The Alexander was low in just a few days. Although Greta loved teaching and enjoyed the time in the classroom, she had been sure that the upcoming ceremony on Saturday would have made the day crawl by. But she had been wrong. Before she knew it, lunch had come and gone. Normally, she would have had lunch in the teacher's lounge. But Rook had asked her to skip it because he was sure that lichen teachers would have been too focused on the fact that she was binding with Alexander. And he didn't want to have to beat anyone up for talking ill of his leader or his future leader's mate, since Greta had missed the last 2 days of school. Greta had more than enough work to keep her busy over the lunch hour. Then after lunch her classroom was full of students, and she was back to teaching the languages she loved. Miss Claassen, Greta glanced up at Ruby. Yes, Ruby pointed towards the door. Greta followed Ruby's finger and was surprised to see the school secretary there. She kept the whiteboard marker, set it on her desk, and crossed the floor. Yes. Carol Ann would like to see you in her office. I can take your class until you come back. Greta nodded her head. Boys and girls, you all have work today. Start on page 112 and do parter B and D. Then do parter and C on page 114. Yes, Miss Claassen. With that taken care of, Greta headed for the headmistress's office. She figured that Carol Ann was going to want to have a talk with her about the way she had fallen into the lichen world and now planned on staying there now that she was binding with Alexander. But truth be told, she thought the conversation would take place at a different time. She and Alexander hadn't actually talked about the next year or even the years after it, and if he thought she should or shouldn't be teaching. Greta had no intention of not teaching because she loved it so much. But if Carol Ann didn't want her in the school, there was much she could really do about her job. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. With the way the students talked about Alexander, she could have him talk to Carol Ann and she would be teaching for as long as she wanted. But Greta didn't need to run to Alexander for help with such a little problem. And perhaps she was only asking her to the office to give her a gift and wish her good luck on the upcoming ceremony. Patrick heightened his hearing to listen to Greta for as long as he could. He didn't like when Greta was out of his sight when she was on Alexander's property. It helped now that Alexander had his men there to watch her. Patrick wasn't worried about Greta so much as he was worried about the people in the lichen world that wanted her out of the way. Patrick wasn't a fool. He knew how lichens could become leaders. And one of the easiest ways was to kill a leader. And Greta was the easiest target for a leader in the lichen world by far, especially where she was on Alexander's property. He stopped listening when Greta's footsteps faded too far for him to hear them any longer. At least Rook was at the school to keep an eye on Greta. It made it easier for Patrick because he couldn't just up and leave the classroom to watch Greta when she left. He was only a student after all. Usually, there were more than 2 members in a clan. And usually they weren't all teenagers. That would normally give the leader an option to choose for a second. But Greta was picking a second between Patrick and Isabella, and Patrick couldn't blame her. He wasn't exactly old enough to take on an entire clan on his own. Not for the first time Patrick wished he was older than he was. Sighing, he tried to push that out of his mind. He had Greek to focus on, and Miss Claassen had given a lot of homework that she would expect on the next day. And Patrick knew, if he didn't finish it in school, she would make him finish it at the clan, and he would rather fight with Alexander's men than do simple school work. He had been taking fighting classes with Alexander's men about a month after Greta had become his leader, and Patrick looked forward to each bout. Despite the amount of Greek homework he had, Patrick still felt the hour drag on. Too often he glanced at the clock and then the door, wondering where Greta was and why she hadn't returned to the classroom already. The final bell rang. The classroom erupted into noises as the boys and girls gathered books, broke into conversation, pushed in chairs, and headed for the hallway. Patrick participated in none of that. As was the custom now, Patrick waited in the classroom for Isabella, and then they went home with Greta and whomever was her guard that day. Slowly he packed his bag, wondering, not for the first time, where Greta was. Nearly a half hour passed. The school was slowly being emptied of students. Even with his heightened sense, he could hear hardly a student in the building. He stood up. He was about to go look for Greta when he heard footsteps. They were clearly feminine footsteps, and he found that the muscles that had been so taut for so long finally loosened up. That was until he looked at the doorway. It was Isabella, and her face was ashen. Jumping to his feet, Patrick left his bag and books forgotten by his desk. "What's wrong? Isabella, what happened? Did somebody say something?" "They're here," Isabella interrupted with a whisper. Patrick shook his head, not understanding anything he was hearing. "What are you talking about?" "Pooh, I caught their scents when I was walking out of my classroom," Isabella whispered again. She was shaking like a leaf, so Patrick pulled her into a hug. "Nothing can happen to you here. Miss Clarkson is here. Mr. Winslow has his men here. You're perfectly safe." She shook her head. It was them. From Prague. The last word was too faint for Patrick to hear, but he didn't actually need to hear Isabella, because at the same time, his heightened senses had picked up the scent she had been talking about. Then men from Prague were indeed in the school, and they were heading their direction, no longer caring about any of their school things. Patrick snatched the book bag from Isabella's hand, tossed it across the room, grabbed her hand, and pulled her from the room. "Follow me, Patrick." Patrick shushed her with a look. "I'm going to keep you safe. Just stay quiet." He led Isabella at a run down the hallway. It wasn't really sure where he was going, but he needed to get away from the stairs where the men seemed to be coming. After reaching the end of the hallway, Patrick knew he had to do something. By the scents below him, Patrick knew the people from Prague had someone waiting at the other stairwell in case they had decided to take that way down. And Patrick was betting that they had someone on the elevators. "Patrick, why are they here?" she whispered. "Let me think. Let's go in the theater," Isabella said. "They have the inside room that not many people know about. And I think there might be a window in there. Perhaps we can go out the window without anyone noticing." "Good idea." Patrick took Isabella's hand once again and they raced to the theater. He followed Isabella as she raced down the aisle to the back of the theater and opened the door to the costume room. The place was littered with boxes, shelves, and racks of costumes, but behind it all there was a small window. "Patrick, come on," Isabella said, dragging a particularly heavy box over to the window, so they could reach it. "1 second. Bella," Patrick whispered, his face as a pale white. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and dialed a number he had memorized, but never thought he would use in a million years. "Hello." The voice was distracted as if it couldn't be bothered to pay attention to a conversation on the phone. Patrick gulped. "Mr. Winslow, we have a serious problem." All distraction was now gone. Alexander was now giving the conversation his undivided attention. "What is the problem?" Patrick had never liked him and never had a problem telling him that. It was because of his intense dislike for him that had Patrick going to anyone else but him for help. The problem had to be a serious one to have him call him up. "The Lycans from Prague are here." "Patrick," Isabella shouted as she locked the door and started to pile things in front of it. "They're coming." "Patrick, which Lycans?" Alexander asked. "Seen Kay and his clan." "Patrick, no, Mr. Winslow," Patrick said. "It's not Seen Kay. It's the ones who took us." He turned to Isabella. "Come on, Bella. Let's go." Up, he said as he helped her up to the window. Patrick, Alexander called into the phone. Patrick picked up the phone. "They'll be in the room in under a minute." Patrick told Alexander. It was going to be even faster than that. Nothing in the room was meant to stop full-grown Lycans trying to get what they wanted. "We have to run." "Where is Greta?" Patrick shook his head even though Alexander couldn't see him. "I don't know." I don't know. Patrick. Isabella screamed again as the pounding on the door intensified. Alexander felt his blood run cold. He felt his leadership role come out. Patrick, take Isabella and run. Get out of there. He'll find you. You will run and keep Isabella safe. Do you understand me? Miss Clarkson, you will run and keep Isabella safe. Patrick, Alexander ordered again. My men will find you. Now go, girl. Patrick dropped the phone, hoisted Isabella out of the window, holding her hands to help her fall more carefully to the ground. Shift as you fall. Isabella, knowing that female lichens handle falls much better than male lichens. Once Isabella was out the window, Patrick followed her. He dropped beside her, already in his wolf form. Without using words, he got Isabella to follow him away from the school. He didn't want to leave Greta alone at the school. But Alexander told him too. Whoever was in the school with Greta was about to be in some serious trouble. They had Alexander's mate, and he was coming to get her.